The Louisiana State Police found the first body on the morning of March 23, 1994, floating face down in the brackish water of Bayou, Terrebonne, 7 miles south of the town of Dulac. The corpse belonged to Travis Lee Como, 34 years old, a shrimper and part-time poacher who had been reported missing 4 days earlier by his common-law wife. The medical examiner would later determine that Como had been shot 3 times, twice in the chest and once in the back of the head, with a 12-gauge shotgun loaded with double-aught buckshot. But Travis Como was just the beginning. Over the next 11 days, investigators would recover 11 more bodies from the murky waterways and hidden ponds scattered throughout Terrebonne Parish. Some were found tangled in cypress roots, their limbs gnawed by alligators and snapping turtles. Others were discovered weighted down with cinder blocks and logging chains, submerged in channels so remote that even the most experienced hunters rarely ventured there. 12 men dead, 12 families shattered, and the reason they died, the reason an entire bloodline chose to become executioners, was a hunting dog, not a fortune in drugs, not a blood feud spanning generations, a blue-tick coonhound named Buckshot who had been in the Landry family for 8 years. If you have the courage to hear this story, if you can stomach the reality of what happens when honor becomes indistinguishable from madness, leave your like and subscribe. Because this is not fiction. This is the documented record of how 12 men were fed to the swamps of Louisiana over a dog that most people would have replaced for $300. Terrebonne Parish in the early 1990s was a place where prosperity had become a distant memory, something the old-timers talked about while drinking warm beer on sagging porches. The oil boom that had transformed South Louisiana in the 1970s and early 80s had collapsed, leaving behind rusting derricks and abandoned work camps that looked like the skeletal remains of some industrial beast. The shrimping industry, once the backbone of the coastal economy, was dying a slow death as foreign imports flooded the market and hurricanes battered the coastline year after year, destroying boats and decimating the catch. In Dulac, a fishing village where the majority of residents could trace their ancestry back to French Acadian settlers who had arrived 2 centuries earlier, the unemployment rate hovered near 40%. Main Street, which had once boasted 3 seafood processors, 2 marine supply stores and a bustling cafe, was now a corridor of boarded windows and peeling paint. The morning air carried the smell of decaying vegetation from the surrounding marshes, mixed with diesel fumes from the few working boats and the ever-present odor of stagnant water that collected in ditches alongside the crumbling 2-lane highway. During the summer months, the heat was suffocating, a wet blanket of humidity that made every breath feel like drowning. Mosquitoes swarmed in biblical clouds at dusk. The winters brought cold rain that seemed to seep into your bones and never leave. People worked when they could find work, poached when they could not, and drank to forget the difference. It was a hard place, unforgiving and merciless, and it bred hard people. Beauregard Landry was 61 years old in the spring of 1994, a man carved from the same unforgiving landscape that had shaped his ancestors for 7 generations. He stood 6 feet tall, but seemed shorter because his spine had curved from decades of hauling nets and crawfish traps. His hands were massive, scarred and calloused, with knuckles swollen from untreated arthritis. He had worked on shrimp boats since he was 12 years old, the same age his father had started, and his grandfather before him. Beau, as everyone called him, drove a 1976 Chevrolet pickup truck, forest green with rust blooming along the wheel wells like some cancerous growth. He smoked Camel cigarettes, 3 packs a day, and drank his coffee black and strong enough to strip paint. His daily routine never varied. He woke at 4:30 every morning, made coffee in the same percolator his wife Marie had used before she died of breast cancer in 1987, and sat at the kitchen table smoking and staring out the window at the bayou until the sun came up. Then he would drive to whatever job he had managed to find, dock work or boat repair or occasionally running a shrimp boat for one of the few captains still making a living. But the real center of Beau Landry's life, the thing that gave him purpose beyond mere survival, was hunting. And hunting meant buckshot. The blue-tick coonhound had been a gift from Marie during her final year, when she knew she was dying, and wanted to give her husband something to care for, something to love after she was gone. Marie had paid $275 for the 8-week-old puppy from a breeder in Houma, money they could barely afford, and she had made Beau promise to take care of the dog. Buckshot was not just an animal to Beau Landry. The Hound was a living connection to his dead wife, the last gift she had given him, the last tangible proof that she had loved him enough to think about his loneliness in advance. When Beau looked at Buckshot, sprawled on the porch or sleeping under the kitchen table, he saw Marie's hands stroking the puppy's ears. He heard her voice saying the dog's name for the first time. Every time Buckshot ran through the woods, nose to the ground trailing a coon or a rabbit, Beau felt his wife's presence beside him. The dog was sacred. The dog was family. The dog was the only thing Beau Landry had left that mattered. Buckshot disappeared on the night of March 11th, 1994. Beau had let the dog out before bed, same as always, expecting him to do his business and scratch at the door within 10 minutes. But midnight came and went, with no sign of the Hound. Beau walked the property, whistling and calling. He drove the back roads with his windows down, listening for the distinctive bay of a blue tick on a trail. Nothing. By dawn, Beau knew something was wrong. Buckshot had never run off before. The dog always came home. Beau spent the entire day searching, enlisting his 3 sons, Beauregard Jr., 38 years old, Etienne, 35, and Claude, 29. They combed the woods and swamps for miles, asking neighbors, checking with the animal control office in Houma. No one had seen the dog. It was Etienne who heard the rumor first, whispered by a cousin who worked at the fuel dock. Travis Comeau and his crew had been bragging at a bar in Du Lac about running dogs with leg-hold traps, catching them for fighting pits or selling them to research labs up north. Comeau was known in the parish as a poacher, a man who would take anything that wasn't nailed down, who respected no boundaries and followed no laws. He ran with a loose network of men just like him, maybe 11 or 12 regulars, all of them on the wrong side of respectable society. They stole crawfish from private ponds, ran illegal gill nets in protected waters, and shot deer out of season by spotlight. And apparently, they had started trapping dogs. Beau Landry drove to Travis Comeau's house on the afternoon of March 13th, 2 days after Buckshot had vanished. The house was a single-wide trailer set on cinder blocks at the end of a rutted dirt road, surrounded by junk cars and rusting appliances. Comeau was in the yard working on an outboard motor when Beau pulled up. Beau kept his voice calm and respectful. He explained that his dog was missing and that he had heard Comeau might know something about it. Comeau looked up from the motor, wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag, and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Comeau said he did not know anything about any dog, and even if he did, what was Beau going to do about it? It was just a dog. Dogs ran off all the time. Maybe a gator got it. Maybe it was already dead in a ditch somewhere. Beau asked if he could look around the property just to be sure. Comeau laughed. He told Beau to get off his land before he called the sheriff. Then Comeau said something that sealed his fate. He said that if Beau was stupid enough to let a valuable dog run loose, then Beau deserved to lose it. Beau stood there in the dirt driveway, the afternoon sun beating down, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. He had tried to do it the right way. He had asked politely. And he had been mocked, humiliated, dismissed. Beau got back in his truck and drove home without another word. That evening, Beau Landry called his sons to the house. They gathered in the kitchen, the same room where they had eaten thousands of meals as a family, where Marie had served gumbo and dirty rice and taught her boys how to clean crabs. The table was scarred wood, stained by decades of coffee cups and crawfish boils. Beau sat at the head, smoking, his face expressionless. He told his sons what had happened with Comeau. He told them about the rumors, about the dog trapping operation, about the disrespect. Beauregard Jr., the oldest, asked what their father wanted to do. Beau took a long drag on his cigarette and said that Buckshot was family. He said that Marie had given him that dog, and losing it was like losing Marie all over again. He said that there were people in the world who thought they could take whatever they wanted, who thought the Landrys were too old or too poor or too broken to fight back. He said those people needed to understand that some things were sacred, that some lines could not be crossed. Etienne asked if Beau wanted them to go talk to Como, maybe rough him up a little. Beau shook his head. He said talking was done. He said Como had made his choice when he laughed. Claude, the youngest, the one who had inherited his mother's gentle nature, asked what happened if they went to the police. Beau laughed, a bitter sound. He said the police did not care about a missing dog. He said the law was for people who could afford lawyers and had friends in the courthouse. He said the Landrys had never been those people. Then Beau said something that changed everything. He said that if they did this, if they went after Como and his crew, there would be no going back. He said they would probably end up in prison or dead. He said he would understand if his sons wanted no part of it, but Beau was going. He was going because without respect, without the willingness to defend what was yours, you had nothing. You were less than nothing. The three sons looked at each other, and then they looked at their father, and one by one they nodded. They were in. Not because they were evil men, not because they enjoyed violence, but because they were Landrys, and Landrys protected their own. The planning took 3 days. Beau was methodical, patient. He sent Etienne to watch Como and identify the other men in his crew, to learn their routines and their habits. Etienne, who had done 2 tours in the army during the Gulf War, treated it like a reconnaissance mission. He compiled a list of 12 names, men who ran with Como regularly, who participated in the poaching operations. Some were brothers or cousins, some were just drinking buddies who had fallen into the life. It did not matter. They were all complicit. They had all benefited from stealing what belonged to others. On the evening of March 18th, Beau gathered his sons again. He had procured 4 shotguns, all 12-gauge pumps, reliable and common. He had bought extra ammunition at a Walmart 2 parishes away, paying cash. He had acquired 2 lengths of heavy logging chain and 8 cinder blocks from a construction site. He had studied a map of the Bayou, identifying the deepest channels and the most isolated spots where bodies could be hidden. He explained the plan in a calm, steady voice, the same tone he might use to describe how to patch a leaking roof. They would hit the men one by one, or in small groups over the course of several days, taking them when they were isolated, vulnerable. No witnesses, no mercy, no second chances. Beauregard Jr. asked what would happen afterwards. Beau said they would turn themselves in when it was done. He said they would not run, would not hide. He said they would tell the truth and accept the consequences. He said the important thing was making sure that Travis Como and everyone who rode with him understood, in their final moments, why they were dying. The first kill happened on the night of March 19th at 10:15 in the evening. Travis Como was at a bar called the Rusty Anchor, a cinder-block building with no windows and a gravel parking lot. Beau had been watching from his truck, parked down the road with the lights off, waiting. Como left the bar drunk a little before 10, stumbling toward his truck. Beau followed him at a distance, no headlights, navigating by memory, and the faint glow of Como's taillights. Como turned onto a dirt road that led to a boat launch on a remote section of Bayou. Beau knew the place. It was deserted at night, used mostly by poachers launching boats in darkness to avoid the game wardens. Beau parked and got out, carrying one of the shotguns. Como was at the water's edge, pissing into the bayou, when Beau walked up behind him. Beau said Como's name once. Como turned, confused, his pants still unbuttoned. Beau told him this was for Buckshot. Then Beau shot him in the chest. The sound of the shotgun blast echoed across the water, a flat crack that sent nightbirds screaming into the air. Como fell backwards into the shallows, his body half submerged. Beau walked closer and fired twice more, once into the chest and once into the head, making sure. Then he dragged Como's body into deeper water and left it there floating among the lily pads and water hyacinth. The second and third victims were brothers, Wayne and Derek Boudreau, 31 and 28 years old, who ran a bait shop and sold stolen marine equipment on the side. Beau and his sons found them on the night of March 20th at their shop, which was really just a shack on stilts overlooking a canal. It was 11:42 at night when the Landrys pulled up. Beauregard Jr. kicked in the door. The Boudreau brothers were inside, drinking and playing cards by lantern light. They tried to run. Etienne shot Wayne in the back as he headed for the rear door. Claude shot Derek in the leg, dropping him, and then Beau finished him with a blast to the chest. They wrapped the bodies in plastic tarps, loaded them into the bed of Beau's truck, and drove to a spot Beau knew, a deep pool in a remote section of swamp, accessible only by a narrow levee road. They tied cinder blocks to the bodies with logging chain and pushed them into the black water. The bodies sank without a trace, disappearing into a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow light itself. The killings continued over the next 6 days, a methodical campaign of extermination. Justin Arsenault, 42, shot twice in the head while working on his truck in his driveway at 1:30 in the morning. Randall Thibodeau and his cousin Michel, both in their mid-30s, ambushed while checking crawfish traps in a private pond, their bodies dumped in a channel that fed directly into alligator nesting grounds. Lyle Benoit, 51, the oldest of Comeau's crew, killed while walking from his girlfriend's house to his car. 3 shots at close range that shattered his ribcage and tore apart his heart. Each kill was clean, efficient, without hesitation. The Landrys worked like men, performing an unpleasant but necessary chore, like slaughtering hogs or putting down a rabid dog. There was no rage, no frenzy, just cold purpose. By March 25th, 8 men were dead. The parish was in a state of panic. The sheriff's department had connected the murders, recognizing that all the victims ran in the same circles, but they had no suspects and no clear motive. The local newspaper ran a front-page story warning people to lock their doors and avoid going out after dark. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said it was a drug cartel from New Orleans. Others thought it was a revenge killing by someone the poaching crew had crossed. Gérard Dupuis, 26, died on the night of March 26th while sitting in his car outside a convenience store waiting for a friend. Beauregard Jr. walked up to the driver's side window and fired 3 times through the glass, then calmly walked back to the truck where his father was waiting. Kenny Rodriguez and Jason Hebert, both in their early 30s, were killed together on March 27th while working on a shrimp boat docked at a private pier. They were night watchmen, guarding against thieves, which would have been ironic if it was not so tragic. Etienne and Claude approached them in darkness, shotguns raised, and gave them no chance to surrender or explain. 4 shots in rapid succession, then silence. The bodies were left where they fell, sprawled on the dock, because Beau had decided it no longer mattered if they were found quickly. The message had been sent, the debt had been paid. The final victim was Marcus Savoy, 19 years old, the youngest of Comeau's crew. He died on the morning of March 28th while delivering newspapers on his bicycle, a part-time job he worked to help support his mother and younger sisters. Beau Landry shot him once in the chest on a quiet residential street at 6:45 in the morning, just as the sun was rising. Marcus fell from his bicycle and lay bleeding in the road, newspapers scattered around him like white birds. He looked up at Beau and whispered, "Why?" Beau told him it was because of Buckshot, because of respect, because Marcus had chosen the wrong friends and the wrong life. Then Beau shot him again, and Marcus Savoy stopped asking questions. When it was over, when all 12 men were dead, Beau Landry and his sons drove back to the house on the bayou. They cleaned their weapons in the backyard, disassembling the shotguns and scrubbing the barrels with solvent and rags. They burned the clothes they had worn during the killings in a rusty oil drum, watching the fabric turn to ash and smoke. Then they went inside, washed their hands with dish soap, and made breakfast. Beau fried eggs and sausage, while his sons sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and not speaking. The food tasted like nothing. They ate because it was something to do, because the alternative was to sit and think about what they had become. At 9:30 in the morning, Beau called the Terrebonne Parish Sheriff's Office and told the dispatcher that he wanted to confess to 12 murders. The dispatcher thought it was a prank until Beau started listing names. The police arrived 20 minutes later, 6 patrol cars and a SWAT van, officers with rifles drawn. The Landrys walked out of the house with their hands raised. They did not resist, they did not try to run. They lay face down in the dirt while officers handcuffed them and read them their rights. Beau's face was expressionless, almost peaceful. He had done what he needed to do. The rest was just details. The trial lasted 6 weeks and became one of the most publicized criminal cases in Louisiana history. The prosecution argued that the Landrys were cold-blooded murderers who had committed a massacre over a trivial grievance. The defense attorney, a public defender named Raymond Gauthier who was hopelessly overmatched, tried to argue temporary insanity and extreme emotional disturbance. He painted a picture of desperate men pushed beyond their limits by poverty and grief. He talked about Marie Landry and the significance of the dog. He brought in a psychologist who testified about the cumulative effects of economic depression and social marginalization. None of it mattered. The evidence was overwhelming. The Landrys had confessed in detail, providing information about each murder that only the killers could know. Beauregard Landry took the stand and explained in a calm and measured voice that Travis Comeau had stolen his dog and disrespected his wife's memory, and that such an offense could not stand. He said he had no regrets except for the families left behind. He said he would do it again if faced with the same choice. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Beau Landry was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and sent to the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. Beauregard Jr. received the same sentence. Etienne and Claude, because they were deemed to have acted under their father's influence, received sentences of 50 years each. All 4 men are still incarcerated today. Beau Landry is 82 years old now, confined to the prison infirmary with congestive heart failure. He has never expressed remorse. When asked in a 1999 interview why he had killed 12 men over a dog, Beau replied, "It wasn't about the dog. It was about respect. Take away a man's respect, and he's got nothing left to lose." The families of the 12 victims struggled to understand what had happened. Travis Comeau's common-law wife, Angela, told reporters that Travis had never mentioned trapping any dog, that he was a hard man but not cruel, that he had loved animals. She said Beau Landry was a monster who had invented an excuse to commit murder. But other voices in the community were not so sure. There were whispers that Comeau and his crew had been terrorizing the parish for years, stealing and poaching with impunity because the law did not care about poor people's property. Some said the Landrys had done what needed to be done, that they had cleaned up a problem the police were unwilling or unable to address. A bartender at the Rusty Anchor told a reporter off the record that Comeau had bragged about catching dogs and selling them to fighting rings in Mississippi. A shrimper who had known the Landrys for decades said that Beau was the most honorable man he had ever met, and that if Beau said Comeau stole his dog, then Comeau stole his dog. The truth, as is often the case, was probably more complicated than either narrative, but in the end it did not matter. 12 men were dead, 4 men were in prison. And the Bayou kept its secrets. The house where Beau Landry lived, the house where he and Marie had raised their sons, stood empty for several years after the arrests. Vandals broke the windows. The roof collapsed during Hurricane Lily in 2002. By 2010, the property had been foreclosed on and sold to a developer who tore down what was left of the structure and filled in the lot. Today, it is a grassy field overgrown with weeds and palmetto bushes, indistinguishable from the surrounding swamp. There is no marker, no sign that a family once lived there or that their story ended in blood and tragedy. In Dulac, people still talk about the Bayou Hound massacre, usually late at night after too many drinks, their voices low and uncertain. Some say they understand why Beau did it. Others say he was insane, a madman who murdered 12 people in cold blood. Most just shake their heads and fall silent, unwilling or unable to articulate the complex truth that sometimes ordinary people, ground down by poverty and loss, snap in ways that seem incomprehensible to those who have never felt that kind of desperation. The debate continues in courtrooms and academic papers, in true crime forums and documentaries, but none of the arguments or analysis changes the fundamental reality. 12 men died because a hunting dog disappeared. 12 families were destroyed because a grieving widower could not let go of the last gift his wife had given him. 12 lives were extinguished because in a place where people had nothing, respect was everything, and disrespect was a death sentence. There is a lesson in this story, though it is not a comforting one. The lesson is that the distance between civilization and savagery is thinner than we like to believe, that the codes and laws we create to govern our behavior only work when people have something to lose. Beau Landry had already lost everything that mattered to him. His wife was dead, his livelihood was gone. His sons were trapped in the same cycle of poverty that had claimed every generation before them. The dog was all he had left, a small piece of normalcy and love in a world that had become unbearably cruel. And when that was taken from him, when Travis Como laughed at him and dismissed his pain, something fundamental broke. The social contract dissolved, the thin veneer of civility peeled away, and what remained was the oldest law of all, the law that governed human behavior long before courts and constitutions, the law that says some wrongs demand blood. Beau Landry was not a monster. He was a man pushed past the point of endurance, a man who decided that death was preferable to dishonor. He was wrong, of course. Murder is always wrong. But understanding why he did it requires us to confront uncomfortable truths about justice and desperation and the terrible things that happen when people believe they have no other choice. If you visit Terrebonne Parish today, you can still find people who remember the Bayou Hound massacre, though their numbers dwindle with each passing year. They will tell you about the fear that gripped the community during those 9 days in March of 1994, when no one knew who would be next or why they were being targeted. They will describe the relief and horror that came with the Landry's confession, the realization that the killers were not strangers but neighbors, men they had known and worked alongside. And if you press them, if you ask whether the Landrys were justified in what they did, you will see their faces harden, their eyes grow distant. Because that question, more than any other, exposes the fault lines that still run through these communities, the unspoken tension between those who believe the law is supreme and those who believe that sometimes the law is not enough. The answer you receive will depend on who you ask and what they have lost, and how far they think they would go to protect what little they have left. Beau Landry sits in his cell at Angola, an old man waiting to die. He does not receive many visitors. His sons are incarcerated in different facilities, scattered across the state. His grandchildren, if he has any, do not know him except as the monster from news stories and Wikipedia entries. He spends his days in the prison infirmary, hooked up to oxygen, his body failing one system at a time. He does not read. He does not watch television. He simply exists, suspended in the endless present tense of incarceration, waiting for the end. When asked by a prison counselor if he had any regrets, Beau said only that he wished he had found Buckshot before things went so far. He said he hoped the dog had not suffered. He said nothing about the 12 men he killed or the families he destroyed, because in Beau Landry's mind, those men made their choice when they crossed him. They chose dishonor. They chose theft. They chose to laugh at a grieving man's pain. And they paid the price that such choices demanded. It is a worldview that seems alien and terrifying to most people, a glimpse into a moral universe that operates by rules we have supposedly outgrown. But it is the worldview that governed human societies for thousands of years, and it still exists, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right combination of pressure and loss to bring it roaring back to life. The Bayou Hound massacre is many things. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of vigilante justice. It is a study in the psychology of revenge. It is a snapshot of a particular time and place, a dying culture clinging to old codes in a world that no longer values them. But more than anything, it is a reminder that the monsters we fear are not born from some innate evil or genetic defect. They are made. They are created by circumstances and choices, by loss and desperation, by the slow accumulation of indignities and betrayals that finally becomes too much to bear. Beau Landry was not a monster when he married Marie, or raised his sons, or worked the shrimp boats. He became a monster when he lost everything and decided that respect was worth more than life. Travis Como was not a monster when he woke up on the morning of March 19, 1994. He became one when he stole from the wrong man and laughed at the consequences. And the 12 men who died were not monsters either. They were just people, flawed and struggling, and trying to survive in a world that offered them few options and fewer mercies. They made bad choices. They fell in with bad company. And they paid the ultimate price, because in a place where poverty strips away everything else, pride and respect become sacred, worth killing for and worth dying for. Sometimes the monsters we fear are not born, they are made, one missing hunting dog at a time.